Hey, this is Driver 88 and I am a die-hard McLaren racing fan. Most young people today would probably only know McLaren from their F1 team. But if we go back to the Bruce McLaren days, to the 60s, McLaren cut their teeth on Can-Am racing. These were some of the most powerful, most dangerous, most extreme race cars that have ever taken to the tarmac. And today we're going to be driving a 650S Can-Am Special Edition car. McLaren won 43 victories in this racing series. They won 5 different championships. These cars were truly extreme. And this car that we're driving, I think, is a bit of an ode to that era. This 650S Can-Am represents 50 years since the first Can-Am race. It's a very special and unique car. I'm going to drive it now. As far as I'm aware with this story, back in the 60s, McLaren Orange didn't exist until Bruce McLaren decided to paint their cars orange in Can-Am racing. And I believe that was because on black and white television, an orange hue would stand out a little more than the other colors. Now I'm hoping that story is true. This car, along with just black and red and Papaya Spark, are the choices that you had for the 650S Can-Am. And thus the story of McLaren Orange, now an absolutely iconic color. So there's a host of external changes to the 650S that make this an ode to a Can-Am racing car. Firstly, we've got a carbon front splitter, the carbon hood with the famous Bruce McLaren number 5 racing number. We've got these gills, which of course release more hot air from the braking system. Now to the side, you'll see these really unique alloy wheels, which are forged, and they basically have a style which is very unique for a modern McLaren, and they look very similar to the racing cars that I'll show you now. We've got the carbon side blades, carbon roof. We've got a carbon air brake, which even the air brake, there's sort of some similarities to the old air brake of the 60s Can-Am racing cars. And it's from the rear that you'll notice straight away that this is a 650S Can-Am. So you've got the quad tips on the car, which are actually an ode to the trumpets, which come out of the enormous V8 Chevy racing engines sticking out of the back of the Can-Am racing cars. So that's quite different than the standard 650S rear. Now, the interior is quite highly spec'd. This is an MSO car at the end of the day. We've got a fair amount of carbon, but not as much Alcantara as you'll see in some other 650S models. A fair amount of leather on the steering wheel, on the dash, and these seats are also unique for this model. So we have the blue on the interior of the seats, which is a hark back to the old racing cars of McLaren as well. Now, despite having no roof, the 650S is still a huge performer. So 641 horsepower, 678 Newton meters, 0 to 100 in 3 seconds. If you can get the rears warm and hot, you could potentially run at least a mid 10-second quarter mile. Let me just take you back to the 60s though, to try and describe to you how insane Can-Am cars were. By the time McLaren made its last Can-Am car, it was 8 litres plus, 800 horsepower plus at 600 kilos. Today, this is 1,468 kilos. So if I do some quick math, the equivalent of a Can-Am car with this car would be 1,950 horsepower with the roof down to the rear wheels. So that's how crazy driving a Can-Am car was if you converted it into today's terms, with no driver aids whatsoever. Now there are just 50 Can-Am models produced, all of them in Spider form, and that is because the Can-Am race cars, of course, were all open-top race cars. There's just 2 of them here in Australia. Now back in 2016, a 650S Spider was about 550,000 Australian dollars. This model I think would have been at least another $100,000 plus on top of that. Today, this model with less than 10,000 kilometers is asking 380 grand Australian before on-roads and taxes. And I think it provides relatively good value given how unique it is, and the performance of the 650S Spider, as you'll find out now, is still incredibly high even for 2025 standards. found a little bit of a break from the rain in winter here in Melbourne. And one thing I will say is I've had the privilege to own a couple of McLarens in the past, and I always tell people these engines make all their peak torque and peak power at 6,000 and 7,000 RPM. So you really want to get a Spider, because these engines only really sound good when they're at red line, and they sound so amazing. When you've got the roof down, you can hear it so much better than in a coupe. You also only add 50 kilos more without losing any rigidity. So my hot take on McLarens is always, if you can, go for a Spider instead of a coupe, purely for the overall experience. If you've driven a number of McLarens before, you might know that some of them of this vintage are not all put together as best as others. And this MSO example is incredibly well put together. Everything is really, really smooth. It feels like a brand new car, essentially. All of your touch points, there's no creaks or rattles or anything. The 650S exhaust, the 3.8 has its own sort of unique exhaust sound. It's a little bit different than the 4 litre in the later McLarens. 640 horsepower, 7-speed dual clutch is instant. In that respect, the gearbox hasn't aged a single day. And like all McLarens, on our really badly broken roads here in Australia, it handles the bumps and undulations and broken roads so much better than a lot of track-focused other supercars, like Lamborghini and even particularly the GT Porsches. They're just very unforgiving. Whereas this car, you can turn the suspension down to be perfectly soft enough for road-going use. One thing I've noticed with this car is the seats are really quite comfortable. They've got a bit of padding on the side, which is not like most other McLarens. You know, the more Ferraris and Lamborghinis that we have on the channel, the more I'm always drawn back to McLarens. They've just got this brilliant mix of steering feel, lightweight. The front end is so easy to just put where you want it. They're so rewarding at any speed, tons of torque. I just love McLaren road cars. And it's a testament to the fact that Bruce McLaren, of course, made a prototype road car. So if he was to live for many years more, we may well have seen a McLaren automotive decades before it came into being. So this is Driver 88. If you're interested in a McLaren like this, there's plenty on offer at our friends, Lorbeck Luxury Cars. We'll see you next time.